at the end, I should say, the end of chapter 2, we were learning about Shimi ben Gera, and Shimi ben Gera was the individual who David HaMelech had wanted to kill, but he couldn't because he had promised him that he wouldn't hurt him, and ultimately, when David HaMelech was dying, he asked Shlomo HaMelech to see to it that he does get punished, which the way we understood it was that he should get atonement for his sins. And Shimi was an interesting individual because on the one hand, he was a very righteous person and very great scholar. On the other hand, he made some major mistakes. So, on the which seems surprising. Normally, you would think someone who makes these type of mistakes would be from the lower level of society, and yet Shimi ben Gera was this great scholar and seemingly holy person. He was even the teacher, Shlomo HaMelech's teacher. Yet he made these mistakes. In any event, Shlomo HaMelech warned him not to leave Yerushalayim, that he shouldn't go with his. See, Shimi ben Gera was very. The danger of him was that he was a potential rebel. He was a potential rebel, and because of that, you got to sort of like put a leash on him. And Shlomo HaMelech sort of did that. He told him that he needs to not going to kill him as long as he follows the rules. The rules are he's got to stay in Yerushalayim and live there. Basically, it had to do with not doing his rebellious activities by telling his members of his tribe how bad David was and how bad Shlomo is, and so on. So if he keeps him on the leash, he won't start spreading all of his rumors, propaganda, so on. So here we have Shimi ended up needing something and outside of the Jerusalem. What his two of his servants had run away. So Shimi decided to go after them. They went to the city of Gas, which I believe is probably what we call now Kiryat Gat, which is a city in a little southern Israel. And Shimi went there. Different opinions as to why, what exactly went through Shimi's mind, different thoughts of what was going through his mind. Why did he think he could transgress? Because he made a promise to Shlomo that he's not going to leave. Shlomo HaMelech told him, warned him. So it was basically a life or death, situation where if he's going to transgress, he's subjecting himself to death, which sounds surprising that he would have transgressed. Besides transgressing an oath, which it sounds, in the wording, it sounds like he made an oath. So it deserves explanation and understanding. What was Shimi thinking? Did he just take the oath and think that it was more loosely worded and not so precise? So in other words, he could, if he's not moving, maybe he's only going temporarily for a short time. He's not stopping there. He's getting what he needs and comes right back. For whatever reason, he was not allowed to leave Yerushalayim, but for some reason he thought that this was some exception. He's going because he's getting it's a big loss to him. So he's got a major loss here. For some reason, he didn't. I guess he didn't realize. He thought that Shlomo, being Shlomo's teacher, maybe Shlomo wouldn't mind. But ultimately, here he is facing Shlomo now, and Shlomo is going to rebuke him and have him killed. And that's what we're up to for verse 41, chapter 2, verse 41, in the book of Kings 1. Kings 1. Chapter 2, verse 41. I should mention that the same that we mentioned with regard to the book of Samuel, same thing applies to the book of Kings. That although there's Kings 1 and Kings 2, just like Samuel 1, Samuel 2, but according to the Talmud, there is no such thing. Kings 1 and Kings 2, it's all one book. The division of these books into chapters was basically done by the Christians, and they divide into chapters. Of course, we the, the the fact that they divide it into chapters just makes it does make it easier for us just to know where we're up to, but it's not something that was sourced in the Torah, and therefore dividing it into books from Kings 1 and Kings 2 is also done by the Christians, and it's not necessary. It's not true. It's not correct. Really, the Book of Kings is one book, and the Book of Samuel is also one book.
Some people think that some people thought that there's two prophets named Samuel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yes, Ben.
God, was that in Israel at that time, or was it with the Philistine?
Well, the Plishtim were in areas of Israel that were legally called Israel. What we call biblical Israel.
But I thought God was one of those places that sometimes they were there.
Well, it does say it was Achish. He went to Achish, the king of Gath.
Okay.
But is it real Israel? Yes, it's considered Israel. Like they don't, as far as I know, they don't read the Megillah on. They don't, they don't keep 2 days of Yantiv in Gath. They keep 1 day, so it has to be Israel proper. Okay. So anyway, we're at verse 41 here. It was told to Solomon, to Shlomo, that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath in return. So the king sent a message summoning Shimei and said to him, "Did I not adjure you by Hashem and warn you, saying on the day that you leave to go here or there, you shall know well that you shall certainly die. And you answered me, the word is good, I have heard. So you accepted the oath. So why have you not kept the oath of Hashem and the commandment that I commanded you?" The king then said to Shimei, "You know of all the evil that your heart knows that you did to my father David. Hashem now brought your evil upon your head. For King Solomon is blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before Hashem forever." Now, so this is this verse 45. It mentions that Shlomo HaMelech's reign is sort of like praised, and the reason why he's praised is because whatever he did, the community accepted and felt that he was just in his decisions, in his judgments. And so I don't really like this English translation for the King Solomon is blessed. I think it should say, and King Solomon is blessed, and his and the throne of David shall be established before Hashem forever. And what that refers to is, on a simple level, one of the commentaries says that it means that now that the enemies, the rebels, the potential rebels, have all been removed, weeded out, now King David's throne, which is basically now in the hands of Shlomo, it can now have everlasting establishment, because Shlomo HaMelech has gotten rid of all the potential problems. But then there's a deeper explanation from the Matzudas David, and that is that David HaMelech had promised Shimei that he's not going to kill him. And here Shimei died, or Shimei was killed for transgressing he transgressed the commandment that Shlomo HaMelech gave him. So
it was an agreement, a command.
So here it says that David's kingdom is established. It means his word. In other words, his promise that he's not going to kill him because of his thing. This has been established. This was correct, because he was killed for a different thing. He was killed because he didn't follow the rule that Shlomo HaMelech placed upon him. So the way the Metzudas David explains it is now King David's word has proven to be honest. That David's word now was kept. That in other words, now that he's dead, there's no, it's over. This David promised he wouldn't kill him, and he didn't kill him. And now we're up to verse 46. The king then commanded Benayahu ben Yehoiada, and he went out, struck him, and he died. So this is the end of Shimi ben Gera. Again, Shimi seemed to be a complicated situation. It was the teacher of Shlomo HaMelech, which is possibly why he thought that Shlomo would have mercy on him. But ultimately, he caused his own death. Now, what we see here is that Shlomo HaMelech seemed to have good mazel, because the people, as the verses seem to be saying here, the people seem to appreciate whatever Shlomo HaMelech did. Now, if I did any of those things, I'm sure the whole community would say stories. He's angry, he's killing people now, he's in this mode or that mode. But Shlomo HaMelech had this seemingly very good mazel that people respected what he did. Like he had good luck, so to speak. This is sort of like Hashem's promise to David. Now, David had a lot of people making up stories about him. The people were constantly just mentioning how he's evil and he's a bad person, adultery, murder, all different types of things that they came up against Shlomo, even against David, even though the Talmud says that he didn't sin in any of these matters. But nevertheless, David HaMelech didn't have that type of mazel. Shlomo HaMelech, he seems to have that type of mazel where people are appreciating his greatness, his decisions, his justness, and so on. And it would seem that it came in the merit of David HaMelech, that it's all in the merit of David that he's having this special. So even if a person finds themselves having challenges and tzaros, doesn't mean that they're not getting rewarded for it. The reward will ultimately come to their children, in other ways. Yes, Mordechai.
Wait, so does this mean that when the king puts somebody to death, he's not limited to the four types of execution that the base does?
And where do you see that?
Right, because it sounds like here Benayahu probably just stabbed him with a sword or something like that, and that's not one of the four forms of death from the base.
Well, hereg, I think it's called hereg. I think it is one of the cutting. You're saying it looks more like
I guess it's not.
than...
I guess it's not explicit as to exactly where he struck him. So I guess if he had cut off his head, then I guess that would have been hereg. But we also find, I think, then we find earlier, I think in the first book of Malachim, where somebody kills somebody by stabbing them in the ribs or something.
Yeah, but this doesn't say that.
Right. So we don't know exactly how.
Yeah, it doesn't really say, but this falls into the category, it would seem, of one of the king killing someone for not following this. In other words, it doesn't look like it went through the system of government that applies to every yid. It's a special rules that apply to people who go against the king. So even if it was could be, there are opinions that it needs to be go through the court, but but it has a different category of being done by a category of being part of the Morid B'Malchus. So it's in that category. But it could be that it's the same thing as Hereg. As far as I know, it's Hereg is the I have to look it up in the book in Maimonides. It would be in the book of Kings. He has in the end of Maimonides. We can look it up over there. But if I'm not mistaken, it falls into the category of Hereg. That's one of the four penalties of death. Yes, Anna.
No, I'm
no
just,
question. Okay, I thought I saw
no.
your hand. Okay.
No, I'm fine.
Okay, so we're up to chapter 3. So ultimately, we got rid of the rebels, and the people accepted it. So this is the kingdom. The kingdom was thus established in the hands of Solomon. In the hands of Solomon. Okay, and now comes the next complicated story, and this is the story that has to do with Shlomo HaMelech marrying an Egyptian woman, an Egyptian princess. And here, this is the story, chapter 3, verse 1. Solomon made a marriage alliance with Paroi, the king of Egypt. He took Paroi's daughter in marriage and brought her to the city of David until he finished building his house and the house of Hashem and the wall of Jerusalem all around. So he's marrying what seemingly is something that's marrying someone who seemingly is prohibited. It's a prohibited marriage. Why is it prohibited? Well, for a few reasons. Number one, did he convert her? Number two, there are people that have a category where they're Jewish because they converted, but they're not eligible to marry into a regular Jewish person. Rather, they have to wait a few generations until they can do that. Who are those people? Like a Mitzri, an Egyptian. An Egyptian has to wait for a third generation. So let's say an Egyptian wants to convert. So he converts. Now you have a male Egyptian number 1, convert 1. And then you have a female Egyptian who converts, and they get married. So they are 2 level 1 converts. They converted from being Egyptian, and they're Jewish, but they cannot marry Jewish people. They marry each other. They can. So no, convert number 1 can marry convert number 1, and they can marry each other. Now, they have a child. Their child is called convert number 2. And then there's another family of Egyptians that have a child. So that would also be convert number 2. So these 2 children can now get married. They can't marry a Jewish person, but they can get married. Now, when they have a child, that would be Dor Shlishi. The 3rd generation is allowed to enter into the Jewish people. So the child of that second union would be allowed to marry into the Jewish people. And that's what not all converts does that apply to, only Egyptians. And certain nations we're very strict with that they can't marry in, but 3 generations later that they can marry into the Jewish people. They can become Jewish, but they're not allowed to marry a regular Jewish person.
Rabbi.
Now,
That cuts
yes.
down the group of shidduchim that they can make.
Yeah,
Rabbi.
very limited. Yes, it's a very limited shidduchim. But yes, Ezra.
What if the second generation Egyptian married, let's say, a first generation convert of one of the other nations? And
So it goes
so
after
does that
the
mean that
Gam.
the third? So what happens to the 3rd generation there?
If I'm not mistaken, they would be allowed to marry that convert would be that child would be allowed to marry into the Jewish people. But if the convert number 2 marries an Egyptian convert number 1, that child would not be allowed to marry into. That's why I give an example of convert number 2 marries convert number 2. Because if convert number 2 just says, I want to marry convert number 1 of an Egyptian that just converted, then the child will now be called a convert number 2, even though one of the parents is a convert number 2 already. It doesn't matter because it's hoilech achar hapogum. It goes after the one who has the blemish. And Egypt is considered, the convert number 1 would basically be the more blemished one. So that would make that the child is only a convert number 2. So you need a convert number 2 to marry a convert number 2 to have a convert number 3 come out, be a permitted to the Jewish people.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
Ben.
you.
Are the Egyptian converts different than the Kuti?
Yes.
A kuti, the kutim were different. It's a different category completely. They were questionable converts. The kutim. In other words, if they converted properly, we would accept them and they could marry into the Jewish people. The problem was that the kutim were unsure if their conversion was sincere. And so for many generations, it was for much time, there was a question as to, are they Geirei Emes or Geirei Arayos? Are they true converts, or are they converts because they're afraid of the lions, which was something going on then, that the lions were eating up a lot of the non-Jews that lived in Israel at the time. And but that they don't have the rule of waiting 3 generations. Now, nowadays,
I'm sorry, what about Moab? Moab, I think, is 10 generations, isn't it?
No, the Moabites, well, it depends. The woman Moabites are allowed right away.
Yeah.
But the men Moabites are not allowed.
Not 10 generations?
Even, I think it says even 10 generations.
Oh, I see, okay.
Now, the thing is that the converts, Egyptian converts, nowadays, we don't have this issue because the people of Egypt are no longer the same nation that was in Egypt then. Yeah. So therefore, we don't have to be concerned about converts now. If someone converts and they say, "Oh, I'm coming from Egypt," you can become Jewish, but we're not going to let you marry anyone for 3 generations, and you're going to have to find the Jewish, an Egyptian convert as well to marry, or if you want to, or you could, if you want the grandchild to be acceptable, you have to marry a different type of another convert, and so on. We don't tell that to them, and the reason is because nowadays it doesn't apply, because they're not called the real Egyptians. The real Egyptian nation was scattered. Sancheriv came and mixed everyone up and moved people around, and whoever comes to convert is they're from the majority, called the Parish, Meruba Parish, and we consider them a convert from the general public, and they could marry a regular Jewish person.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the question is over here. So we have Shlomo HaMelech. What is he doing? Marrying, number one, he's marrying this Egyptian princess. Even if she converts, he's still not allowed to marry her because she's not allowed to marry a regular Jewish person. So the commentaries struggle to figure out what exactly, how do you explain this? Even the Talmud, the Gemara itself discusses it as well, and there are different ways of explaining it, did he really? First of all, she converted, so that would be how it was permissible. But even if she converted, maybe the law that you have to wait 3 generations doesn't apply to women. So there could be such a exemption. Not that we follow that view, but Shlomo HaMelech maybe thought that was the view at that time. That they thought that they would they followed that. He followed that. Additionally, he thought that this was in order to bring peace to the Jewish people, so there shouldn't be wars. So he felt that this was an area where it was permissible to transgress one of the laws in order to bring peace. There's other ways of explaining it, that maybe he didn't actually marry her, even though it says he married her. I mean, the Hebrew word by Yischatein sounds like he married her, but in truth, it could be that the Gemara mentions this thought. The Gemara in Yevamos mentions that maybe he didn't really marry her, but he had so much love for her, it was as if he married her. But he really had is more of a relationship, but not an intimate relationship, and he had an appreciation for her and so on. But ultimately, the commentaries do struggle with this story, and the question is, we'll find later that the Shlomo HaMelech's wives they ended up worshiping idols. So, and he didn't rebuke them at the end of his life. So the question is, how do we understand that? Did they always worship idols? Did they fall into it later? Did Shlomo HaMelech's wife, this princess, the Paro's daughter, also fall into that same category? Or at this point, was she sincere in her conversion? And so the commentaries do deal with that issue of which we'll discuss later on when we see the sins of Shlomo HaMelech's wives. We'll talk more about that. Now, what's interesting is how this story comes right after the story of Shimei. This story comes right after the story of Shimi ben Gera. So the commentaries mention that this is the source of a Gemara. The Gemara says a person should always live near his Rebbe, place of his Rebbe, place of his teacher. Why should you live near your teacher? So it says Shlomo HaMelech would never have married the daughter of Pharaoh had he lived near his teacher. His teacher would have told him, you're not allowed to do that. Would have told him off. But here, Shimi ben Gera, who was living in Yerushalayim, he was executed. He was just executed. All of a sudden, afterwards, what happens? Shlomo HaMelech marries the daughter of Paroi. Had Shimi been still alive, he would have rebuked Shlomo. Would have told him, you're not allowed to do this, even though your goal is to make peace, which is something we're going to see that Shlomo, in fact, even his name means peace. Shlomo is from the word shalom. And so it was all, he understood that he's trying to make peace with the nations, and that's what that's to benefit Klal Yisrael. They should be able to have peace. So he wanted to marry. He understood that he should be marrying political marriages. He should be involved in political marriages, which ultimately will cause less fighting. Because if he's related to these other nations, then they won't start wars against him, which will ultimately be beneficial to the Jewish people. Let's see, we have some questions over here. David.
And this explanation you're giving regarding the didn't marry her, it seems to fit. It sounds like the order of the verses are opposites from what they should be. It says over here that Shlomo became the son-in-law to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and he married the daughter. It should be the other way. It should be that he married the daughter of Pharaoh and became the son-in-law of Pharaoh.
Uh-huh. So how do you, so what does it sound like from the verse? What's the best explanation based on the way you see the verse?
That it wasn't so clear cut that he married or he did marry. The way you're interpreting it, according to the interpretations, that he wasn't a clear cut marriage, that fits with the strange way.
So you like the way the Gemara says it, that
Yes,
that
yeah.
he didn't actually, in other words, you see that fitting well with the
Right.
verse, because it
Right.
says that he first became a son-in-law, so to speak, or he had a relationship with Paroi, and he married Paroi, and he took the daughter of Paroi. In other words, it is a strange, right? It's a strange term because it speaks about Paroi. That's a good point. Very well said. Very well said. That, in other words, why is it telling us about his relationship with Paroi instead of his marriage to the daughter of Paroi? Good, very good point. I like that. Thank you, David, for mentioning that. Yes, Ben.
I thought I heard before that Shlomo HaMelech wanted to marry the daughter of Pharaoh, and Shimi told him not to do it. But now that Shimi died, he did marry her.
Uh-huh. So you're saying he was warned already beforehand from Shimi not to?
That's what I heard. I don't know where I heard it, but I heard it somewhere.
So I don't
You don't remember?
I don't know if that fits. See, it does mention that as long as Shimi was alive, he didn't marry her because he was afraid from him, but not that he actually did rebuke
I
him.
see. Okay.
You know what I mean? He was afraid he might get
I
rebuke.
thought because he was alive, marry her, but once he died, that's when he could marry her.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Yisrael, or
Just a brief point. It seems a little strange to me. I understand the diplomatic implications under Shlomo's decision, but
Yehuda, we can hear you.
surprises me that he wouldn't reflect on how his father might have dealt with that situation, given he was such a young person at the time.
so you're comparing Shlomo to David HaMelech, to his father.
Not comparing it. I'm saying as a young person faced with, a chronologically adult issues, I would have thought that he would rely more upon his father's example.
Mhm. Right. In other words, we don't find that David HaMelech went around doing these type of things. So where did Shlomo get this idea from? So my thought is that the fact that his name was Shlomo was an understanding from him that this is, what's meant is that the establishment of Shalom in his days, the fact that he's supposed to have peace in his days was a sign from him that maybe this is what he's supposed to do in order to accomplish that. Not only that, but maybe he was trying to ultimately affect and impact the non-Jewish world. You see, the idea of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, getting the non-Jews to appreciate the Jewish people, Kiddush Hashem, and the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, these are all areas that are ultimately leading to the coming. They're ultimately leading to the the final, the ultimate goal is that the whole world will serve Hashem, one God, and that's the ultimate goal. So Shlomo HaMelech believed that this is it. This is, we've finally reached, we're going to reach that time in my days. I have to set it up right, set everything up right, that it should work. I'm going to build the Beis HaMikdash. This is going to be the final Beis HaMikdash. At that time, there was no idea, no thoughts that he should be, planning. There are going to be 3 Beis HaBatei Mikdash. And the third one is going to be many years from that. That wasn't in their dream, in their thoughts. They didn't have any, even bad dreams like that. But the thought was that this is the real deal. David HaMelech came, and I'm establishing the Malchus based David. I'm going to finalize it. David died, and then now is Shlomo's term. So Shlomo's in turn. So it seems that he wasn't really taking the exact path that his father had paved, but instead, the situation is different. In my days, we're not having enemies. We don't have wars going on. So, and I'm supposed to be the man that's going to build the Beis HaMikdash. That's a sign that I'm not supposed to have any wars. So maybe that's an additional point, that Hashem promised my father that I'm going to build a Beis HaMikdash. That could also be an additional idea, that if I'm supposed to build a Beis HaMikdash, and my father couldn't because he had blood on his hands. So that means I'm not supposed to have any blood on my hands. That means I should do things in order to make sure that that's what happened. So maybe along those lines is where he was thinking that he should, that this was the right thing. And it wasn't necessarily wrong what he did. It's just the way he went about it was wrong. Now the Talmud does mention a surprising thing. We know that the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash came about. The second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed by the Romans. Where did Rome start? What was the origin of Rome? So it says there is a medrash that says that when Shlomo HaMelech married the daughter of Paroi, it says Gavriel, the angel Gabriel, he came down and put a stick into the sea, and mud gathered around it, and this became the great city of Rome that ultimately destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. This is like it's the exact opposite of what Shlomo HaMelech's goal was. His goal was ultimately, I'm building the Beis HaMikdash. This is gonna make peace with everyone. We'll have the whole world acknowledging that there's one God in the world. And everyone's gonna serve Hashem. And really, what happened? The exact opposite. He marries the daughter of Paroi, and this caused that Hashem told Gavriel, Malach Gavriel, to come down, put a stick in the ground that's going to ultimately cause to be the floor, the ground of Rome, which is the source of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. But that's what it says in the Gemara. Now, the question there is an interesting thing that is questionable, and that is there is a source and there is a medrash that says that Moshe Rabbeinu sent emissaries to get an esrog when they were in the desert, to get an esrog from Rome. Italia shel Roimi. And that's the source that many people have to buy a Calabria esrog, an esrog from Yanov, Calabria, certain place in Italy that we get esrogim from, that is supposed to be the most beautiful esrogim. So people pay extra money to get this special Yanov esrog, Calabria, an esrog from a certain area there. But the question is, if that's true that Moshe Rabbeinu sent him to this place, but this place didn't exist until Shlomo HaMelech married the daughter of Paro. It was water then. So how could that medrash fit with this Gemara, where the origin of Italy started with the days of Shlomo HaMelech. But that's an interesting question that that's come up before when we talk about the esrog, the origin of esrogim, of Calabria esrogim. Okay, we have a question over here, David.
Yeah, if you look at the shape of many countries, they have a particular shape. And the shape of Italy is unlike the shape of any other country in the world. It looks like a big boot. And so this goes together with the fact that the origin is a stick in the ground, and it made this unusually shaped country that looks like Italy.
Interesting.
Further to that, Calabria is at the toe of the boot, right on the Strait of Messina, at the bottom of the by the toe.
So you're saying is that anywhere near, is Calabria near dry land, or is it near water?
No, it's on the water. It's on the
It's
water.
on the water. Right. So yeah, so the question is, how is it possible that Moshe sent them to get esrogim from there? If that area was part of the water. But in any event, this is the Talmudic statement that that's where the origin of Rome. This is the origin of Rome. It came from Shlomo HaMelech marrying the daughter of Pari. Now, I should mention one more point, and that is that during this time that Shlomo HaMelech is king, and during the time of David HaMelech, we were not allowed, the Bezdin, the main Bezdins did not allow converts. So this is an additional question as to how did Shlomo HaMelech marry these foreign women if the rule was during the days of David and Shlomo we didn't accept converts. And the reason why we didn't accept converts during those days was because we didn't really believe that they would be fully sincere. And so the Bezdin at the time, the Sanhedrin at the time, said we're not doing any converts nowadays because there's good reason why they might want to join the Jewish people. The reason why they might want to join us is because we are either very strong in the time of David HaMelech. They won many wars, and miraculously conquering. And the time of Shlomo HaMelech, there was peace in his days, and he was very wealthy, and people benefited greatly by being in the Jewish community. It was a tremendous benefit of being there and being part of the part of the greatest nation. So because of that, they said no converts. So the question was, how did these women convert to marry, that Shlomo would marry them? Yes, David.
When we lived in Toronto, a prominent Lubavitch family we were friends with were the Janowskis, which is Yanov. It's people from Yanov, Yisrael Janowski, Yossi Janowski. And there were a whole family of Janowskis. And you think about it, it's Yanov.
Did they ever tell you that they come from Italy?
I never asked. I thought of it later. But I never asked.
Right. Okay. Guess we could ask them if that's where their origin is from. It's not. I'm not convinced yet. It sounds good, but I'm not convinced.
The ski is from either Russia or Poland.
It sounds to me like a Russian name of a city or a Polish city, like Lithuania, some other, sounds to me like there could be Yanev, Yaroshev, it sounds like there could be some city like that in other places as well.
You see Rabbi Janowski, but you don't see Rabbi Calabria.
Anyway,
Yeah,
all right.
usually-
Listen, good
Usually
thought, but it's
ski, usually ski is Polish. Russian, the
Uh-huh.
real names of Russian are ending with ov.
Um,
Davidov and so forth.
my
Anyway,
family ends with SKY and they were Russian. SKI is
Yeah, they
Polish.
can be, people are moving around, but
And
Uh-huh.
usually SKI is
basically-
Polish.
anyway,
Yeah.
all right. So, but this was I was expecting something from the you were gonna quote from the Ma'am lawyers or something. You're giving me historical names and okay. Well, in any event, this is the Gemara about and the question that I just asked was about making converts, accepting converts in those days, and the understanding is that the Sanhedrin didn't accept converts in those days. However, there were individual bezdins, individual courts that did accept converts. And people questioned, we don't know. We'll see if they really are sincere or not. We'll find out later. How sincere are these converts? But the fact that they didn't allow the converts to be to convert in those days didn't mean that if someone was converted, that their conversion was unkosher. No, the conversion was possibly kosher. We just we're skeptical maybe about it. It was done by a bezdin. It wasn't the way the Sanhedrin wanted things to be done, but it sort of went through. It went through by hook or by crook. They did accept converts, and that's how Shlomo HaMelech converted some of these women. Okay, so now we have this questionable marriage that Shlomo HaMelech married this daughter of Paroi, and we're up to verse 2. However, the people brought offerings upon high places for a house, for the name of Hashem had not yet been built in those days. So
Rabbi.
people were, yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is from Me'am Malays. I'm not making this up.
Oh, okay, good.
So it says over here that this whole idea of accepting the converts or not accepting the converts, a lot of these things would be clarified in the time of Mashiach with the final redemption. So Me'am Lois says that Shlomo, great though his wisdom was, did not realize this. That his generation, it must have seen that the era of Mashiach had already arrived. And was he himself not Mashiach, the anointed one, the son of David? Surely his children would rule in peace forever. And the times of the trouble and persecution were over. And as he laid the foundation for the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim, he prepared to spread Hashem's Torah throughout the world and to bring all of mankind together into Hashem's kingdom.
So in other words, Shlomo thought he was Mashiach, maybe.
It says that it seemed to his generation.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed to his generation, not that he thought, but it says what he said, he himself, not Mashiach. This is what the generation must have seen at the time of Mashiach had already arrived, and that he was Mashiach.
That's a very interesting element to this story, that the generation of Shlomo HaMelech thought that he was Mashiach. Very interesting. We know the Maharal's generation thought that he was Mashiach, or students at least were very convinced that he was Mashiach. Maharal's day. Anyway, okay. So that sort of fits with what I was saying earlier, that they didn't expect there to be 3 Beis Hamikdashes. They thought there was going to be 1. This was it. So Shlomo wanted to teach the whole world. Yeah, I guess that fits hand in hand with that idea. Okay, very good. Thank you for bringing that up. So in any event, here we have this idea that people were not. The verse earlier talked about Ir David, the city of David, and about building the house of Hashem, the wall of Yerushalayim around it. Shlomo did not finish building this house of Hashem, and or did not even start it really. But he didn't finish building his house. So basically, where were people bringing sacrifices? So it says they would bring sacrifices in the bamois, and they would bring sacrifices on the altars. Where were these altars? These high, calls it high places, because the word bama literally means elevated platform. So like a bima. Now the bama was there were bamais that people were allowed to bring sacrifices on bamais. Which sacrifices? If they made a promise to bring a sacrifice, they could bring it, and they didn't have to go all the way to Yerushalayim or David. They didn't have to go to where the Mishkan was. Where was the Mishkan? In Givon at this time. This time the Mishkan was in Givon. They were allowed to bring individual altars. They could go to an individual altar, a personal altar, I should call it, and they would bring a sacrifice there. Now, the problem with doing that is that it doesn't differentiate between the way the non-Jews do things and the way the Jewish people do things, because they also make altars all over the place, and they bringing sacrifices. So it gives some level of potential sin, potential idol worship by doing things this way. But it was permissible. It was permissible to bring sacrifices on bamis, on these personal altars, but it wasn't necessarily the right thing to do for the general, for righteous people, for people who want to go beyond the letter. According to the letter of the law, it's allowed. And David HaMelech says was careful never to bring sacrifices on the bamais, on these, even though it was allowed. He didn't bring sacrifices on these personal altars. He would go specifically either to the place where the Mishkan was, which is now in Givon, or he would bring a sacrifice where the ark was in Ir David. Those were the two places he would bring his, because right by the ark there was also an altar there. So those were the two options of bringing altars for David. David said, "I'm not doing that. I'm not bringing altars in other places." But Shlomo HaMelech relied on the letter of the law. The letter of the law allowed bringing sacrifices on bamais. And the verse here mentions that everyone, the Raka'am, the nation, would bring, the people would bring sacrifices on these personal altars because the Beis Hamikdash wasn't built yet. And verse 3 clarifies this. It says, Solomon loved Hashem, acting in accordance with the decrees of his father David. Only upon high places he slaughtered and burned offerings. So there was one thing he did different than his father, was that he would bring sacrifices even on bamais, that his father wouldn't do that. And the reason, as I mentioned, had to do with the fact that his father didn't want this to be room for people to ultimately end up worshiping idols. And it makes it too similar to idol worship that people might end up falling into that sin because they're so used to bringing sacrifices anywhere. Now, Rashi mentions over here that it's considered something negative on Shlomo's part. That the verse is emphasizing that that Shlomo did something wrong because what ended up happening was he pushed off building the Beis Hamikdash because he was able to bring sacrifice wherever he wanted. He would bring or you possibly you could learn it the opposite way, that he caused people to be bringing sacrifices on these altars because he didn't build the Beis Hamikdash. right away. And ultimately, what happened was that people did fall into idolatry. That's one of the big sins of the people of those days. Now we're in verse 4. The king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there. And keep in mind, if you're confused about where the Mishkan was, so when the Jewish people entered the land of Israel with Joshua, the Mishkan was in Gilgal for 14 years. Then it was for 369 years. It was in Shiloh, the Mishkan Shiloh. Nowadays, they have a place called Shiloh, and it's outside of Yerushalayim, not too far from Yerushalayim. And there is a place called Shiloh. Then that they believe is the same Shiloh as when. Anyway, the Mishkan was there for 369 years. And then the Mishkan was moved to Noiv. And if you remember, we learned that Noiv was destroyed. Shiloh was destroyed when Eli HaKohen died that day. That Eli HaKohen, when Eli's sons were killed, and
Plishtim took
the Mishkan was taken.
Kodesh.
The Mishkan was taken in captivity and by the Plishtim, and Eli fell backwards and died, and then the Mishkan was destroyed. That was the end of the period of the Shoftim, the end of that period of time. So again, the Mishkan Shiloh lasted 369 years. Then it was moved to Noiv, and in Noiv, if you remember, Shaul HaMelech killed out Noiv Ir HaKoyanim. He killed out the city of Noiv, destroyed basically Noiv. So then that's when it was moved to Gibeon, and it lasted in Noiv and Gibeon 57 years. So we're in the time when it's in Gibeon, and this is right before the Beis Hamikdash is going to be built. Now, verse 4 says that Vayelach HaMelech, the king, went to Gibeon to sacrifice there. Now, to sacrifice there, to bring sacrifices, for that was the great high place. This was called the Bama Hagadola. This was the Mishkan, basically. This was where this was the main altar, and it's called the Bama Hagadola. And what did he bring there? So it says Solomon offered up 1,000 elevation offerings on that altar. Now, there, if you remember correctly, if you remember when we once mentioned that Hashem told David, 1 day of your life is better than 1,000 offerings. David HaMelech said, why don't you just let me die a day early? He didn't want to die on Shabbos. He says, why don't you let me die on Friday? Take my life away on Friday. I don't want to die on Shabbos. I'd rather die on a Friday. And Hashem said, 1 day of your life is better than 1,000 offerings that Shlomo HaMelech will bring. And that statement is based on this verse, that Shlomo HaMelech went to Gibeon and he brought up 1,000 offerings. And Hashem is saying about this, David HaMelech, 1 day of David's life was better than all those 1,000 offerings. And with that, we're going to